Often that call from the school means that somebody is being hurt, something went wrong, there's trouble in some way. And so in that, when you know that that is the feeling of so many families, how do we actively disrupt those feelings through our actions, through our communication, and through our relationship building? It really comes down to that idea of how do we reach out in a way that is about celebrating, about success, about providing opportunities to check in about wonderful things that are happening, that invitation into the classroom to disrupt some of those ideas around the school as being this scary space that is off limits. Like, how do we do that in a way that's meaningful for you, your learners, and the school that you're working in? And I love the ideas that people generate, things like sending sticky notes home with celebrations, the giving the email check-in saying that this is something that was great, those standing at the door and saying hello, and just inviting opportunities for conversation that is not always about what isn't going well in the classroom, but what is. And I think going back to that idea that the students come in carrying their whole community around them, that if we really want to meaningfully create relationships with that community, that we have to view that as something that doesn't just happen in the classroom. And so how are we making sure that when there are open invitations to go into our surrounding community, that we're present? If there are events happening that are being hosted by your local nations, how do you make sure that you're showing up? How are you at the farmers market? How do you go to the school sports events? And just sort of be present in different spaces. And that doesn't mean every single one, because I understand that that is completely overwhelming and you can't be everywhere always. But just taking those moments of saying, what am I doing to step out of this space, these four walls, in order to nurture those relationships in more authentic places?
The ministry K-12 reporting policy gives us so much breadth and space, and it's firmly based on evidence and research, that it's the showing learning and communicating learning in diverse ways that are contextual for community, they're contextual for the school and the learners. It may be that students show their learning orally, visually, in multimodal ways, so that their learning is really something that is transparent and visible all the time.
The most important piece to me in communicating student learning is remembering that this is communication, therefore we have to think of purpose and audience. And I want to be writing with the family in mind. This is who's going to read my documentation and my interpretation of what their child has been doing at school. So it doesn't need to be academic. It certainly shouldn't be ranked or percentaged or numbered or lettered. None of that tells me anything as a parent. What I want to know first is, do you like my kid? Secondly, are you teaching my kid? And I think sometimes when we're caught in the communicating student learning piece, we're so worried about correctness that we're forgetting to whom we're communicating. And so we're missing the mark. We're making it more complicated than it needs to be.
Teachers are often socialized to deliver evaluations in ways that sometimes intentionally and unintentionally communicate judgment. For members of communities that have been historically or systemically oppressed, these judgments can carry with them historic pain and historic trauma. And so when we think about our ability and our responsibility to communicate with families, with communities, about what students are producing, what students are capable of, the skills, the genius that they can exhibit, we need to think very carefully about this history and not construct a narrative that is untruthful, not construct a narrative that dismisses areas of need, areas of growth that the young people may have, but rather to consider how to communicate this as a part of a holistic picture of a child, rather than what often happens in the space of schools of seeing one small portion of a child's ability in a particular content area, for example, and assuming that that's indicative of the totality of that young person.
You're getting to become very good readers.
I always send my families a letter at the beginning of the year, just letting them know that I understand what an act of trust it is for them to leave their children with me 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I just really want to communicate that I understand that that's an act of trust and that it's a huge honor for me that they're willing to take that risk on me and do that. So I try and approach my relationships with families with always just communicating them that this is a team. We're a team. We're here for this child, and I'm working with you to give them whatever they need to be successful.
That's something Ashley and I really value, is communication with our parents. And it starts from our very first day. We will inundate them for the first 2 weeks of school with information. And it's newsletters home, it's emails, it's quick phone calls, it's, hey, can I grab you in the hallway? And we build those connections really quickly with our parents so that they understand that we are expecting them to participate in this whole process.
So sharing with parents, communicating the kids' learning with parents is always a little bit of a challenge, I find, at this age, especially when lots of parents saying, I don't know what's going on, my kid doesn't tell me anything about the day. I've seen a change, they used to talk about their day a lot and now they don't want to talk to me about it anymore. And so I've kind of added in a few things this year to help with that. And one of them is like a weekly report, we call it the Glow and Grow, where the kids do a little self-evaluation on their week, and at the bottom there's like what worked well. So oftentimes they are referring to the projects that we're doing. I've had kids in there too write, my art math project is going really well, I'm meeting all the criteria. So that's cool for the parents to see that process. And then weekly emails, I've been trying to really like put a couple photos in each time of what the classroom looks like, and I've had a lot of parents give good feedback that they like that as a spark for communication with their kids. They know what to ask about. And then like official evaluation, the kids have a learning portfolio binder. I kind of have the old-fashioned learning portfolio in binder paper format, and that's been really great. Anything that they hand in to me and I hand back to them, they put in their portfolio binder. They're open, like allowed to take it home whenever they want, but we kind of do 3 or 4 times a year an official, bring it home, share it, look through all the things. Parents have places to write comments about each of the projects and they bring it back.
This year I'm piloting Spaces EDU as digital portfolios. It's a huge learning curve, and you know, the kids are getting good at uploading pieces of work. They talk about kind of what the process is and again connect it to the proficiency scale. Yeah, so the parents are able to access those digital portfolios from home. Parents can see how it connects to the curricular outcomes and where the kids are at.
Like, I'll look at what I've gotten and I'll see, can I do better at this? And if I can, I'll put more effort into a certain area. If I have strong sentence structure but my vocabulary needs, then I'll find better words than using like the basic words so that I can see what I need to improve on and what I'm doing well in.
The big thing I see in these new assessment processes is kids working till they feel proud of their work. And so I think that shifts them in terms of motivation around what they want to do. And so if they're working, before when we were doing letter grades or percentage-based grades, kids were really driven for the number. But now kids are working on like, okay, how do I be proficient? And when am I not proficient, and is that okay with me? And so when they're working and they have that idea of like, you know what, right now it's not such a big deal for me, or right now I can do this and I'm going to push on to extending, working through that internal motivation of working till I feel proud helps kids engage in the learning. And then the piece I think for adults at home is that they're able to see what their child is doing and what they're capable of and what their next steps are.
Once the teachers were on the digital portfolios, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't necessarily a teacher-driven thing. Encouraging the students to take ownership of their portfolios and making connections to curricular and core competencies there. And instead of really focusing on the tasks that had been done or the communication going to parents about what had been happening within the classrooms, we were really trying to encourage the learning that was happening and encouraging the students to be more metacognitive and making connections to curricular and core competencies.
Now in this district, we're using My Blueprint, having a space just to collect the information. I'll give them specific reflection questions that they can add on to. They often take pictures of the work that they've done or pictures of their document that details their learning throughout the unit. And it's just in a place that gives it accessible access either at school, at home, and it's something that you can build on, work on, and continue to access throughout the entire course. And it's really nice to have that to go back to as a way to show the student, hey, look at the things that you have done, you have accomplished, they're here, you've put them here.
I'll put in the assignment, this is all linked, the parents can see it too, and then I'll put in the curricular competencies or the skills that we're trying to get after and develop. So whenever I'm assessing, I'm always coming back to that. How do you know, what is that skill looking like? And then in terms of where it lies in the proficiency scale, I always think about, can that student, are they able to demonstrate this on their own independently? And that's kind of helping them get to that proficiency. Otherwise, they're still somewhere in the developing, and a lot of students are. If they're still needing a lot of guidance and a lot of help, we're still working on those skills. So proficiency for me, if you're sliding into proficiency and you're growing, it's more independent and still checking in and still needing a little bit of help. And then extending would be, for me, can you do it on your own so well that you could teach somebody else how to do it? So I do a combination, I would say, of reflecting on what we're trying to achieve and then where that student is in that process.
You put all of your most important and best work that you've done, and you'd put it into this blueprint thing, and it's a big portfolio. So we have 3 portfolios, and it's grade 8, and then socials 8 and English 8. And we'll put our projects in those certain things, and we can view them over, and we can edit and say what we thought was we improved on. And we can email to our parents, and then they can see what we've learned.
So they access it just by logging into my email. It helps me with my learning and just putting it in to a platform that could help me in the future with just finding a job or anything, because this My Blueprint could also help with resumes or anything. It just helps really for future projects, future abilities and everything. It's a really nice platform to just use.
So maybe I can just
I also have a Google Classroom that parents can sign into anytime and have a look at student work. I encourage students to read their writing out loud. It's such a great way to hear what they've written and to start the editing process. So I encourage them to do that with their parents at home if they want to get another set of ears to help, because I always feel like I'm so stretched at school. I can't see every one of them with 28 students as often as I would like. So the parents that are keen and want to be really involved, I do encourage that as well.
Sometimes your documentation of learning can be as simple as sharing a picture with the families from your group and including even some questions that go with that picture, some prompts. For example, sharing a picture of, this is our fish tank, and you can engage with your child about our fish tank by asking them some of these questions. For example, why do you keep your fish tank so dark? Why do you keep your fish tank so cold? And that gives parents a window into their child's understanding of the experiences of the classroom. Because school doesn't necessarily look the same as what some of the families are used to from when they went to school. So it's really important to engage families in some of the learning that's happening, especially in the kindergarten year, so they can have a little bit more understanding of the ways that schools look different or the way that learning has changed to be more social, more collaborative, more inquiry-based, and less about papers coming home with red checks and X's, and more about what are the questions children are bringing or what are the ideas children are bringing back to their homes, and then the opposite way, what questions and ideas from homes are coming to school that you can incorporate in your teaching.
I also do the e-portfolios. I think that's just a nice fast way of just a weekly, daily kind of way to connect with parents. I do Class Dojo, and we're constantly posting to our class feed whatever we're doing, a little description. I do a lot of little video interviews with the kids and post those to their profile. And so I'll ask a question. We'll talk about it beforehand, we'll brainstorm beforehand, but I'll ask them, what is your learning goal for school? What are you going to do to reach that goal? What's your plan? and then I'll ask them a question based on whatever core competency we've been focusing on class. And parents really seem to love like hearing from their kids in that way. And it's also a nice modeling for parents about open-ended questioning and kind of how we're goal setting and how we're speaking to our children to encourage their agency and their investment in their own learning.
So over the last few years, our district has started moving towards the use of Seesaw. I've been sort of just dipping my toe in and just trying it out. And for kindergarten, often what that means is they've made something and they're like, Madame, take a picture of this, send it to my mom. Can you show this to my mom? And so I said, yeah, I'll post that on Seesaw for you. So that's been one of the ways that we can really engage parents and show them not only what we're working on, but also what the kids are proud of and what they're interested in right now.
Portfolios to me are a really important part of demonstrating student work to themselves, to their parents, to me, to each other. So I have a portfolio wall that I keep up all year round, and I just keep adding their work to it. So nothing ever comes down from the wall, it just keeps going. So I love that they can easily see what the other people have done, because it's very interesting to see the differences. And when the parents come in, very easy to find their child's work. And then during the conferences in the spring, I get them to take down their entire package. So it has a writing piece from the very first day of school, and then it goes all the way up until whenever the conferences are. And I just think it's really cool for them to see their growth throughout the year. I also do an online portfolio where we put anything that is digital. So because it's French immersion, we do a lot of things where they're speaking in French, so I try to record those as much as possible. We also do a lot of small filmmaking where they get to create a film, and I'll put all of that on Seesaw so that their parents are able to go on and also see the work that they've done.
It's sometimes okay to just go old school, and we have binders now, and I ask them any important piece of their writing sample or even a little any assessment they're proud of, they put in their portfolio, and then we have evidence of that in just in a binder format. We keep that so when the parents come in April for to talk about their goals, the kids can go through that binder and show them some of that evidence, so that it's not all on Google Classroom or digital. The parents can actually see it hands-on.
We still are required to do those formal reports of learning, and in particular a written report or summary of learning at the end of the school year. And that's important. As we do that, we use strength-based language and the proficiency scale. So looking at where learners are on that scale related to the competencies of the curriculum that we're assessing, and also having students self-reflect on the core competencies so that their engagement in their own learning, their goal setting is really profoundly entwined in how learning is communicated.
Emerging would be like you weren't there, but like you're kind of getting up to there, but like you still need help. And then developing is like you've kind of figured it out, but you still are in like a little bit of a gray area, but you can still do better. Proficient is like you're good and you can do it by yourself. And then extending is like you could teach another person to do it and you're like really good at it.
In our skill form that we use, the students are reflecting on first their core competencies. So we look at the profiles of the core competencies from the government website, and then we have them assess where they think they're at. So a personal assessment on that. And then they talk about their strengths and their stretches. And this is the basis of the beginning of the skill form. After that, they write a specific goal in reading, writing, and math. And these goals all go home to their adults at home. So one of the big parts of this in communicating student learning is that we want each student to feel like they have a team supporting them, and that team consists of adults at school, adults at home, and themselves. And so we add this skill form to their report card, and it goes home with them so that parents see here's how the teacher is evaluating them, and here's how they are seeing themselves as a learner and where they're going next.
I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm constantly evolving as the student's evolving to add comments and see growth for them. And then I take a lot of what the students are saying. So I do a lot of Google Forms with my kids constantly through the term, and the self-assessments go in there. And I use the words of the student. So I'll copy and paste what they've said, put it in that Excel spreadsheet, and then ultimately at the end of the year I've got this reflection piece that I can go back to. So I copy and paste what they say and put it in their report cards. And that's not just to get like the length of it, it's so that the parent can hear the student's voice.
Another key part of communicating student learning is that we are engaging with families, because again, the research supports more and more that if families are engaged in the learning of their students, that they're going to be those partners in helping the growth of students. And so student-led conferences are a marvelous way for students to be able to assemble some of their work, have parents come into the schools, families come into the schools, and make certain that the learning is transparent and obvious to parents, but it's students that really take the lead role in showing that learning and demonstrating it.
While it's time-consuming to collect these pieces of information and to communicate in that way at the end with a student-led conference, having that detailed comment, having that detailed reflection from the student, you're taking that and you're giving that back to the parent. The reason I continue with it is because I've had the most comments ever and engagement with parents ever in these young junior classes that say, this is the most detailed piece of information I've ever gotten on my students' learning. And those continual comments that I get from parents are enough to keep me going in terms of providing that time and the detail in those conferences that, yes, I want to be able to provide my parents, my students with that type of information. There are also ways to do it where it is approachable and you're able to communicate that to parents, and that type of communication is invaluable.
Conferencing one-on-one and talking to kids is so important, often especially with content or critical thinking, such as in social studies and science. Often kids can't communicate their understanding in writing. So if you're only relying on students completing a written task and handing it in, you are not often getting a true assessment or understanding of what they know and what they've learned. So that's where talking to the kids and either having small group discussions, and there's so many formats for doing that, or having those one-on-one conversations about something they've written, suddenly you'll see, wow, they know way more than what they've been able to put on paper or type out for me.
How I do my conferences each year is that I build our questions based on the 4 big ideas. And so I have students have a chance to prepare that ahead of time and try to revisit the work that they have posted on their portfolio or through their stuff that they have completed throughout the year. And then we meet in a quiet room and we discuss the different areas that they're learning on. And I try to give students an opportunity to reflect on how they've been growing throughout the year. And so I ask them about what are some areas of strength, what are some areas of growth for them, and what are some long-term goals for them for the future in the class, whether they're pulling from their experience in the classroom, their experience outside of the classroom, or maybe some stuff that they researched on their own. And so they have an opportunity to fill that out as a reflection and share that with their parents. And parents have an opportunity to reflect and comment on that as well.
I have them do a self-assessment using the rubrics. I often use rubrics, especially with project work, and we often do a project in the second term. So they'll do a self-assessment, and typically we collaborate and come to an agreement of where we feel like they fall on the rubric. And I like them to be able to explain their learning to their parents and explain why we've highlighted where they are on the rubric, along with comments, obviously, as well.
I think at the end of the day, what we want the students to know how to do is to communicate in the language. So I'm always thinking, what are the essential skills that a person would need to communicate? So I know that they need to be able to be comfortable with the pronunciation. They need a certain amount of vocabulary. They need to know how to progress their language.
What overall do you think you've improved on most in French this semester?
Understanding the French vocab and being able to speak to someone maybe in French.
Okay, and so how do you feel like about this wall? How are you feeling about that?
Good, yeah, know most of them.
Know most of them. Okay, and what do you want to work on next year in French?
Next year I want to work on having full conversations with people.
Okay, and so based on all of this, what do you think your overall proficiency should be in French?
Probably proficient.
Okay.
and a bit of extending.
Bit of extending. So proficient why and extending where?
Proficient because like I knew what to do and then I got it done sometimes on time.
And did you do anything like that you consider where you dug in deeper or anything like that?
Yeah, I think like maybe on the final exam, like doing sentence paragraphs.
Yeah, your final exam paragraph was really strong. That's good. No, you demonstrated yourself well on that. Okay, so proficient with extending in areas of sentence structure, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I agree with that. That's awesome. Thanks. So overall, what do you think you've improved on most this semester?
Pronunciation of French words and taking French words I might know from a sentence to figure out what it means.
Okay, and what do you want to work on next year?
Probably more writing of a paragraph, like slightly longer paragraphs and longer conversations, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
maybe continue with vocabulary words.
And how many words would you say you knew when you walked in?
On that wall?
Yeah.
None.
And how many do you know now?
Probably 3/4 of them.
What do you think your overall proficiency should be in the course this semester, and why?
Proficient because I've gotten most of my assignments done on time and I've understood what I'm doing. I've learned more about French, and assignments that I might not have finished, I sometimes took my folder home on the weekend to finish them.
The way that I have done student-led conferences is structure the questions into 3 sections where there's a question about the big ideas, there's 2 questions about the curricular competencies, the skills that students should be able to achieve, and then 2 questions on the content that they should be able to at least approach. Whereas I find that if you are testing a student on the cumulative content, you often get things overlooked or skipped, and in that way, not necessarily fair assessment of what students have learned if they feel that they've developed a skill more than the content that they don't necessarily remember since September, and you're talking to them at the end of January about their entire learning. You get a better overall assessment of their development as a learner, as a student, through the course.
Sometimes our teacher gives us our work back and asks us to mark it ourselves so we can go over it and be like, oh, now I understand this, and fix it up. I think that's really important that we're able to do that because that really helps with learning, because some people learn better when they're like able to see their mistakes and fix them or like learn from them to be able to do better.
In the research that I do and the teaching that I do specific to assessment, I really lean into self-regulated learning and co-regulated learning as foundational understandings, theoretical approaches, and practices that connect to classroom learning and assessment. And so we really want to think about opportunities for students to set goals for their learning and for us as classroom communities to set goals for learning. For there to be opportunities for students to plan their next steps, but also as a class to plan with our students what our next steps are or how we might achieve our goals. To engage in some learning, both individually and collectively, but also to stop within learning cycles to say, how am I doing? What's working? What's not working right now? And where could I go next? And also then to adjust our actions to better align what we're doing to the goals that we have. And so supporting students and engaging them in cycles of self-regulated learning and co-regulated learning really holds deep potential for increased student engagement, increased student success, but also feelings of belonging and connectedness. And that really truly is part of learning all the time, is a sense of I belong in this learning, I own this learning, I'm part of directing and creating this learning.